Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the MarkeTech Group's very special roundtable discussion concerning trends in U.S. medical imaging. I'm Mark Davis, and I'm a senior partner at the MarkeTech Group. I also manage the ImagePro panel operation in strategic development. For today's participants who may not know our firm, the MarkeTech Group founded ImagePro in 2008. ImagePro is a unique opt-in panel of over 500 U.S. hospital-based imaging administrators, which accurately represents the overall imaging market. In 2010, in partnership with AHRA, we established a standing longitudinal panel of 150 members to support the creation of MICI, the Medical Imaging Confidence Index. MICI is now in its third year of tracking U.S. trends in imaging related to imaging growth and profitability, reimbursement, operating costs, and access to capital. The topics for today's roundtable are related to the metrics and findings tracked quarter to quarter by this MICI index. Joining me is Dr. Krishna Ranowden, the founder and CEO of the MarkeTech Group, who will be moderating our session today. Let me turn it over to Krishna.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for everybody attending this session today. I would like to acknowledge some of our MICI partners, obviously the AHRA and its visionary CEO, Ed Cronin. I don't know if Ed is on the call, but I'd like to acknowledge his vision. We jointly developed this index together 3 years ago. I would like also to thank AntMidi.com, who publish the results every quarter, so it's free. It's available on the AntMidi website every quarter. We're also very fortunate today to welcome 4 hospital executives who are going to provide their insights concerning U.S. hospital imaging trend and will be commenting on the index. On the phone today we have Stan Steele, who is Imaging Director at Hamilton Medical Imaging Center, Georgia. We have also Joe Miconi, Director of Imaging in Boulder Community Hospital in Colorado. We also have Ray Wilburn, Director of Radiology, Radiation Oncology, and Pain Management Services at St. Elizabeth Medical Center in Massachusetts. And finally, Todd Stanley, Director of Radiology at Clarion Health Partners, Indiana University in Indiana. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello. Thank you.
So many of you have submitted questions to the MarkeTech Group prior to this roundtable discussion. We have incorporated those into the discussion. However, if some panelists have some thought-provoking comments, we encourage them to do that and text message them in the webinar message box, and we will address them as we can. So let's get started so we can have everybody finish this session on time. Mark, I'm going to ask you to go to the next slide. This is exactly what you see when you go onto the AntMidi website. Those are different line bars by different element of the index. We'll go line by line and analyzing some of the results. You can see some changes, some are significant, some are not, since we started tracking this confidence index in 2011 Q1. Next slide, please. Those are forward-looking index. So we ask every quarter the same imaging directors, 150 of them, part of the panel, the same questions over time, and we ask them what their confidence is looking forward for the next quarter. So every quarter for the next quarter. So you can see the composite score in black. Some of those changes may be very subtle and some are significant. So let me start with first analysis. We are going to focus right now on diagnostic imaging volume changes. As you can see, we have since the beginning of the index a fairly optimistic view about the prospect, the ability to grow imaging volume. Even though it's been tempering a little bit recently, I can tell you that larger hospitals, more than 100 beds, tend to be much more optimistic about the prospect. So let me ask our panelists their reaction to that. So I can start right now with Joe. What do you think about this result, and what do you expect this year and per modality?
Well, I guess what we're seeing is really modality dependent, and while we have growth in some areas, we're not seeing it in all areas, and I think we're going to get into some of the reasons why that may occur later. But as a whole, we're holding fairly tight to expectations to really perform at about the same level last year in total.
Okay, how about you, Todd? What do you think?
Yeah, we are coming in the first couple of months' data. We're seeing our CT volume down just a little bit, and everything else is staying stable right now, and which is good. The interventional codes are changing, so we're looking at that closely because there's more consolidated of codes on that. So we're going to kind of dissect that a little bit more.
Stan, what's your reaction on this optimistic view and a relatively low decrease on the index for this?
About the same as Joe. Our growth rate so far this year is certainly less than 1%, so I would call it static.
Right.
We are seeing some shift from outpatient to our ED emergency department, but we can get into that later, I suppose.
Sure. How about you, Ray? You see different departments, radiation oncology included.
Right. I have to agree with the other panelists. Our volume is about flat as compared to what it was last year. One interesting note, though, is for the first quarter, we're seeing a growth in nuclear medicine studies for some reason. We're trying to track our referrers right now. So of all the modalities, like I say, most of them are flat except for nuclear medicine, which tends to be up just a little bit. Radiation oncology is kind of dependent upon a lot of oncology referrals, and we kind of follow or mirror the volume that is being seen in the medical oncology departments.
Do you have any explanation about what drives the positively or negatively this volume from your experience, and what you expect for 2013?
Well, I think payers, for one thing, they drive a lot of that volume. What we have been seeing probably over the last year and a half to 2 years is a higher increase in co-pays that patients are finding from their insurance companies. So what we're finding is a lot of time the patient will come in, they'll schedule, let's just use MRI for an example. They'll schedule an MRI and find out they have a $500 co-pay for an elective MRI, and they say, well, I guess maybe my knee doesn't hurt that bad. And so they'll put it off. So I think that's one of the items that is driving the volume is the fact that there are higher co-pays and higher deductibles from insurance companies.
Joe, do you see that as
Stan,
well?
I agree.
Okay, go ahead, Stan. Go ahead.
Well, we're seeing deductibles as high as $5,000, and for insurance coverage, and we're seeing patients actually shop around.
Yeah.
And it's hard for a hospital outpatient center to compete with a freestanding with deductibles like that and the pricing difference.
This is Ty. We're also, Anthem is calling our patients and rerouting them to cheaper places. I'm not sure if anybody else is having that happen. But,
absolutely. This is Stan again. We're having insurance companies actually steer patients.
Great point, because we're experiencing that same exact phenomena in Massachusetts.
And this is Joe, and I can echo the same thing as well. We're seeing insurance companies becoming much more aggressive in steering patients away from the hospital from a pricing standpoint.
This is Stan again. Those that we know about and we're tracking, and there are some we don't know about, we're talking 12 to 15 a month CTs, and about that on the MRI side. So it is significant for us.
So
if I can just address that, this is Ray again.
Yeah.
If I can address that particular point, since we started seeing that, and Anthem is one of the culprits, we belong to a group of 10 hospitals, and so our CFO at the corporate level actually went to Anthem and addressed that particular issue with them. They denied they were doing it, but they were doing it. So we haven't seen as much of that probably in the last couple of months, but I'm sure it's still going on in the background.
Is there a modality that's more prone to this negotiation aspect, contracting aspect?
Yes, this is Stan again. It's the high-end modalities, CT, MR, and nuclear medicine. And it appears to be anything that has to be pre-started that serves as a flag to the insurance company.
Yeah, I agree with Dan. The quicker you get that pre-cert, it seems like the quicker they are to get that. So if we were smart, we would wait till that last minute to get that pre-cert, maybe.
We've actually had them call patients on our campus and redirect them.
Us too.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Yes.
and given that the pre-certs are actually site-specific in our case, they get a hold of that right off the front. The other tactic they're using is we have some insurance companies who have mailed things to our referring physicians, kind of a stoplight report. Doesn't have prices on it, but it says if you're thinking of ordering an MRI or a CT, here's the list of facilities in your area, and they give them a red, yellow, or green light based on pricing, but with no pricing information.
Yeah, we've experienced some of that also in Georgia.
So do you see a shift between hospital to outpatient imaging centers, or do you think the overall pie is somewhat stable because of the pre-cert restraint?
Most of our steerage is to outpatient facilities.
And this is Todd. Most of ours is to independent imaging centers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Todd. This is Stan.
And I agree with everyone else. They are steering them towards those lower cost or lower charging, I should say, outpatient centers.
Yeah.
I see. Excellent. So, I don't know if it's excellent for you, but this is certainly not an overall industry phenomenon that the overall utilization of imaging is going down. This is a redistribution. Mark, do we have any questions from our panelists at this point? I guess we don't. So we're going to move to the next question.
Kristen, I'm sorry, I do have one question.
Okay.
Does the Medicare policy and reimbursement mirror what's happening with the private payers?
This is Ray in Massachusetts. We haven't seen that yet, but matter of fact, we had a kind of a corporate meeting yesterday, and that's what when the CFO came into the room, he suggested that we're going to probably be seeing a reduction in a lot of those reimbursements from the private payers, probably within the next 6 months.
Anybody else wants to comment on that?
Yeah, this is Todd. I know we've kind of did a preemptive. The expectation is that is going to drop, and we did some overall reductions through our facility to try to offset those revenue losses. So we took a big initiative this year to reduce as much expense as possible to prepare for this.
All right. So I guess it's a nice transition to the next element of the index. You can see that the line is much lower. So just so you know, 50 is a very, very low confidence score, whereas 150 is a very bullish score. So you can see that confidence in Medicare future reimbursement has remained fairly low throughout the creation of the index. Some variation, maybe not as pessimistic, but nothing is really significant when you look at the overall timeline. Now, the adequate reimbursement is obviously a concern. What accounts, Todd, for this continuing level of low skepticism on Medicare?
Yeah, I think the combination of codes, IR continues to be hit by more down coding and not be able to bill as many procedures. So I think that's going to affect. There's same thing in nuclear medicine and ultrasound. And then CT, you know, we took a big hit 2 years ago with the abdomen pelvis combination going to one and then angio last year. So, you know, I think each time we keep downcoding, it's going to affect our reimbursement. And, you know, those are high volume studies in CT.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also affects
Okay.
productivity because you're doing the same work, but only have one code that shows up on your count, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is Todd again, and we've worked out a formula where we'll increase our productivity based on that exam so we don't lose our FTEs.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, so hopefully people are doing that because that happened in nuclear medicine about 3 or 4 years ago when the codes went down to, I think from a heart, down to 3 to 1. And all of a sudden it said we only needed 1 FTE, but we're still doing the same volume.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're going to have to put your statistic up so you can get credit for that productivity.
Right.
Right. Because the patients aren't going away. Same volume.
Same volume. Same work is being done.
Right.
How about Joe and Ray, what do you think?
Well, yeah, certainly the continued collapsing of the codes is affecting us, but we've also actually seen a rise in our Medicare volumes, which tends to affect the overall revenue for the cost center, so it's that percentage is shifting higher at the same time that the private payers are reducing in some areas.
Now, do you have any feelings about, when you look at this timeline, the change in the regulation and the law, Affordable Care Act, as we call it? How do you think it's going to be impacting your reimbursement outlook and revenue? Anybody wants to volunteer on this difficult question?
Silent.
I guess the one way that some of this has affected us is that as Medicare has also moved into an authorization process, we're seeing that either deny certain procedures, especially in the interventional suite, or push out the time that we do them because it takes them a number of days at a minimum to turn one of these around. Ultimately, we think we'll probably see more patients, but the reimbursement will continue to shrink, and so we'll end up in a situation where we're doing more for less.
Yeah, this is Stan. I agree with that assessment. The truth is, I don't know the answer to your question, but just from my reading, it appears that the volume will increase, but we will be reimbursed less.
Right, and to that point as well, you know, with the Affordable Care Act, we're going to have to do more with less. So because we're going to be getting less reimbursement, our expenses are going to have to go down. So we have to come up with some alternative ways of trying to provide the same level of service with less resources.
Is there a particular modality where you think you reached already the limit of how much you can go on cost efficiency?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is how far can you go as far as reducing your unit cost? That's not what we're talking about. Doing more with less is managing your unit cost. Is there a modality where you think you reached the max already?
Oh, I think at least from this perspective in Massachusetts, we definitely have reached in a couple of our modalities the bottom line. I mean, if we reduce any less resources, then we'll have to stop providing services.
So what would that be? Ultrasound? Well, give us some examples.
Actually, in nuclear medicine and in CT.
Okay.
And I don't believe, this is Joe, I don't believe that we've hit the basement on this. We're actually kind of going through a fairly competitive market here on pricing, which will continue to drive prices down, but we're not in the basement yet on pricing, I don't think.
I know this is Todd. We have some areas where we, we can't cut anymore, and that's what we're saying the next step will be to, service will have to be reduced or do other creative ways of providing the service. But we are at that, nuclear medicine and general x-ray, we run very lean in those areas. And, the only way to be more efficient, we cover the large surgery, there's, 38 beds of surgery, and we're running technologists up there to cover C-arms, so we have to be more efficient. If we're going to get anything there, we got to figure out a way to control that surgery schedule, when you have 10 C-arms out there running all the time. So that makes it difficult.
All right. Is there a difference?
We went through a massive cost reduction process about 2 years ago, and given all the comparison figures, we are very lean right now on all modalities.
So we're talking technical fee here. How about the professional fee? Any sense of how reimbursement may deter the interest of radiologists?
Well, I think that they're basically suffering the same issues we have been as far as both volumes and reimbursement. They're certainly much more interested in what's happening on a hospital level now that it's gotten into their pockets as well.
Agreed, wholeheartedly. One of our, well, actually our chairman of radiology is the president-elect of the Mass Society of Radiologists, and they are constantly fighting with the providers to lessen the amount of reductions they're trying to put through. So the radiologists are feeling it in their back pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Stan. We're beginning to hear conversations about employment also.
Yeah, that's a good point, Stan. We are too. I mean, there's not a lot of openings out there for radiologists.
We recently had an opening, had 65 applicants.
Wow.
Which is unheard of.
Also, this is Todd, they're requesting some supplemental income at some of our sites.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody else has seen that.
Well, we've certainly seen them request some assistance to cover things like stroke and trauma response, where they don't feel that they can hire another person, and so they're looking at needing to bring someone else on, but want the hospital to contribute to their wages in that role.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And we've gotten requests for Nighthawk reimbursement.
So it sounds like your comments are fairly in line with that low confidence in reimbursement that we see on the chart here. So unfortunately, it sounds like we don't have any positive prospects for this year.
Yeah, one comment I guess I would make is that the radiologist groups typically have not gone through the same reductions that the hospitals have, and so part of the dilemma that our group is facing, at least, is trying to keep as many members employed at the same time that their reimbursements are shrinking.
Mm-hmm. Mark, do we have any questions from panelists for this particular segment?
Yes, actually we do, Christian. Barbara in our audience asked that given this new environment of doing more with less, whether decision support software is a tool that's being used more, and how much of an asset is that tool?
That's a great question, Barbara. This is Ray in Massachusetts, and one of the things we are advocating is to get some decision support software in our order entry, our CPOE, our order entry system for the referring physicians. We haven't made that leap yet, but it's certainly being bantered about amongst the medical staff of which product is going to be the best.
And this is Joe. On the department end, we have been tracking and analyzing our referral base, both from insurance companies as well as individual physicians, to understand how their ordering patterns are changing by modality. What we've gathered from that is sometimes it just reinforces the gut feeling that, yes, over the last year we've seen a significant decrease in studies coming from a particular insurance company. what it does is it allows us to provide feedback to contracting and look at possibly negotiating pricing and or figuring out other strategies with those insurance companies to bring that business back home.
Very good. Anybody else wants to react on the panelist comment? Any others, Mark?
No, Christian, I think you can move forward. That was a good question from Barbara.
Very good. Let's look at now internal operating costs. So OpEx. As you can see, hopefully in just a second, Mark, if we could move to the OpEx score, Alan.
Okay.
There's been a very high overall score in terms of confidence, but a slight decline overall. Yeah, there's an overall trending down since 2010, but we started pretty high. So, you know, this is really about the ability to maintain, manage your staffing cost and internal operation. What is driving this slightly downward trend? Joe, do you have an explanation? We're starting pretty high, but we have a little bit of downward trend.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've all had to tighten our belts a bit. We've done a lot of lean initiatives around workflows, supplies, trying to get that down to the point that we can, and we've taken it down about as low as we can in most areas. So any additional reductions are going to affect hours of operation and access to studies, which we're not keen on doing. But if we get pinched to a point where we have no other options, we don't really have excess staffing. You can only go so far on your supply costs, so that really gets into operational issues around access.
Can you give us a sense if there's a particular category of technologists where salaries have increased dramatically over the last 2 years?
Well, we haven't really, since the economy started to get sort of ugly a few years ago. Increases here of market adjustments have been pretty stagnant. We've seen a similar situation in the job market, that if we have a position open, we have more applicants now than we probably ever had. But you know, we've got our annual increases and things of that nature, but we haven't really seen the market increases that we had in the past over the last few years.
How about you, Ray? Do you see the same?
No, I was just going to comment that we are working in a union environment here in Massachusetts, and one of the negotiating pieces on the table right now, we're renegotiating a contract, and the union workers were all guaranteed certain increases as opposed to the non-union workers. The non-union workers have not received increases in salaries probably for the past 2 years, maybe 3 years, whereas the union workers have all gotten their 2 to 3% increase. One of the things we're asking the union to do now is to have those increases based on hospital performance. So if the hospital can make a little bit of profit, then they'll realize some of that in their union raises. And they really are listening to that and are amenable to talking about it further. So we've not seen salaries go up at all, if anything, because there is such a large workforce out there that are not working. It's keeping the salaries at the same level they were probably 2 or 3 years ago.
How about you, Todd?
Yeah, I agree. It's basically the general wage increase for us, and the inflation rate, and same as the others, we've reduced our operating costs as much, negotiated with our vendors, contrast vendors and radiopharmaceuticals, and looked at all those. So it's kind of not much more margin to take out unless we do cut service.
Yeah.
Stan, in your area, it's more to the south?
Yeah, in Georgia, the market here is extremely tight. Like someone said earlier, when we have a vacancy, we have more applicants than we end up talking to.
Yeah.
Now, so we can't speak about the staff shortage we used to have 5 years ago. I remember sonographers were in high demand, not anymore.
Not true in this area. We have plenty of RTs.
Yeah, I would agree that we have very many in all modalities when we open a position now.
Yeah, this is Todd. We have plenty of applicants also.
And this is Ray, and I'm getting letters from physicians and those in authority recommending technologists because they know them and they're looking for jobs. So yeah, there's a glut of technologists out there right now.
Wow. So essentially, is there a difference in quality of the workforce? I mean, you could have a lot of supply, but not a lot of high quality, well-trained RTs, or you think the quality is pretty good?
Well, we're finding some very qualified people and actually have more opportunity to choose. It's probably not working in the benefit of newer graduates right now, since there is so much talent out there looking for work.
I agree with that statement. There is a lot of talent out there looking for work, so the people without any experience are really finding it difficult to find a job.
This is Stan. I agree.
This is Todd, but I agree. And we're also looking at people not just technical. You know, they have to have a personal customer satisfaction, have that personality to engage in patients. So it's a great opportunity to hire those well-rounded people.
Right.
And an aside to this is that the schools in the local area not only continue to churn out new graduates, but almost seem that they're doing it at a higher rate than before. I think that as people are looking for jobs in the workforce, they're still seeing this as an opportunity, but it is kind of glutting the market.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were to ask any of the four of you on a pie chart, what percentage of the workforce cost is representing your OpEx annual budget? Can you give us a sense? Is that 50% of your annual cost, 70%? Well, give us a sense.
This is Stan. It's about 55.
Our labor costs here in Massachusetts are about 60% of our total expenses.
This is Todd. It's about 60 for us also.
This is Joe. Just kind of looking here at one of my budget reports. It's a lot lower than that for us. It's probably only somewhere in the 15% range.
Wow.
Your labor cost?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now that's including all of fixed costs and such too. If we're just looking at variable cost, it's probably closer to about 24%.
So Ray, you said you're in a market that is unionized. It's a high percentage of your annual OpEx. So obviously this is an important item for you to remain bullish about maintaining your costs over the next few years.
It is because, as you know, in a union environment, you really have not a lot of control on what you can pay your technologists, because it's based on the union contract. So if these raises continue to go into effect of 3, 4, 5%, then that's definitely going to drive our labor costs through the roof. And the only thing, that's one of the few things you can control in this arena. So.
Right. I mean, this is something I can share with you. We can slice and dice the index by many variables, and one I would like to share with you on the internal operating cost is that East, South, Central, and West, North, Central states are much more confident about the future than, let's say, East. So it's kind of confirming that it's a regional phenomenon.
Huh. Okay.
This certainly could have a lot to do with the level of competition in the higher populated areas. We're out here in Colorado. We still have the benefit of open spaces and geographical differences. I had come from Los Angeles where it was much different.
Oh, I can imagine.
So Mark, do we have any panelist question about internal operating costs?
Yes, we do, Christian. Monica wanted to ask the panel about strategies for controlling staff costs, whether it was more about cutting FTEs versus freezing salaries, kind of what the ratio is between the two, and whether these strategies are creating any hardships for the staff, and whether that is kind of equally distributed between the radiologists, technologists, or perhaps both.
Good question. In Massachusetts, about a year, maybe 2 years ago now, we did freeze salaries for non-union people. But we, at the same time, we have to reduce FTEs. So what does that mean for those remaining is that they have to take on more responsibilities. So we're kind of a spread out department. So what I'm finding is I'm having to shift some of our regular X-ray technologists and train them to do the routine CT images that is in an outpatient clinic. For instance, we have a small little scanner up in our ENT department that they only do sinuses on. So I'm able to flex some of my regular technologists and have to free them up to go up to do those sinus CTs up in a different department. So there's a lot of cross-training going on as well.
And this is Joe. One of the tactics that we've taken, despite the fact that there's so many people looking for work, obviously employees are not happy about stagnant wages. So we've also adopted some cross-training, which has allowed us to do some reduction in staff, but we've rewarded those individuals who have cross-trained by giving them a certain % increase to basically say thank you for this work and you're more flexible for us, but we want to reward that as well.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question to you for, do you see a trend potentially of outsourcing staffing? We've seen that in other segments in healthcare. Is that a way to control costs, to outsource to staff management companies?
This is Todd. We don't do any outsourcing, and that we don't see that. That's not really been brought up as an option to us, and I don't see that happening, at least in the next couple of years.
This is Stan. In my area, I agree. I don't see that happening.
I would also agree.
This is Ray. I don't see it happening from the technologist standpoint, but there has been some overtures from the radiologist perspective that a lot of the hospital administrations are looking at these mega groups and having 1 or 2 people on the ground, but actually having the images read by a centralized location. They haven't gone that direction yet, but I know there's a couple of hospitals who have gone that direction.
Joe?
Yes, I would agree that bringing other people from outside is not a good thing for us. We really like to be able to control the training and expectations and such. And the nice thing is during this change in the staffing market, we've had to use less and less contract labor and hardly use any, which is a great benefit because that was very expensive in the past.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's go to the next element of the MICI index. This is access to capital. I remember 2009, there was a huge crisis, as you will remember. The confidence seems to have peaked slightly higher up in Q2 last year, and since then we're going downward again. So, kind of mid-range, more pessimistic than anything else, but, I'd like to understand how you could explain, any of you, the peak and mid-year last year and then why we're going down again?
This is Todd. 2011, we had like 3 million, which was actually more than the year before because of all the crisis going on. And then last year we received 5 million, and then this year I've been told that we're only going to get 2 million. That was early when the survey came out. So that's kind of our trend. What's going on is last year was kind of our our big year, and which was not anything compared to what we had in 07 or 06, almost half. So I think that was a shock for us that we thought that would still be about the same.
This is Joe. As we saw changes in our need to meet meaningful use and move towards an electronic medical record, basically we were competing for the same dollars out of a fixed pool of capital dollars. And so if the IT dollars went up, everything went down for everyone else. And so it's definitely made it tighter for us to get equipment. That being said, if we have a strong return on investment and we can demonstrate that, the funds are still available.
Yeah, this is Stan. I agree with Todd. It is getting tighter, though, because it's getting more competitive. There are limited dollars, and internally, within the hospital, there's a lot of competition for those dollars.
Yeah. How do you see the 2013 compared to last year, gentlemen? Do you have anything to share?
Well, here this is Stan again. It really depends on how the hospital is doing. On the operations side, we're pretty much at budget, but not some years. In the years past, we've actually operated above budget and had really better than expectations. On the investment side, the hospital is actually doing pretty well.
Ray, do you have any comments back east over there?
Yeah, it's our capital basically has been frozen for 2013. We're on an emergency-only capital. Basically, if it's in ashes, you can get it replaced, but if it's not, then you got to make it work. So our outlook is not too rosy.
Do you have an explanation for that decision?
Well, it's the fact that we recently, like I said, this is a relatively new chain of hospitals that was established about 2 years ago, and initially they went out and bought a lot of hospitals, and now they're trying to make those hospitals turn around, and because the hospitals that they bought needed a lot of capital, they're investing a lot of capital in those newer hospitals.
I see. So you don't see a change in the bond market or foundation money?
As a matter of fact, I think the company went out and tried to float a bond in mid-February, and we're waiting on the results of that right now.
I see. How about in the northern region, Todd? How is the bond market going?
Bond market's going good, and our investments are doing well, which is good. I think what we do is we predetermine our capital at the beginning of the year based on last year, based on 2012's performance, and then we allocate that, and then we spend that, based on the investments and performance. And also the same thing, we are kind of being put more in a pool. Before radiology would get all their money in one, and we could do what we want, but now we've been allocated so much to spend, but if it's above a certain dollar amount, we have to go inside the pool to go out and get that. So then we're competing with everybody else.
Joe, how do you rank in radiology in terms of capital budget compared to the other department in the hospital? Traditionally, radiology is pretty high on the list, but how is it now?
Yeah, I would say we used to probably be the king before IT started to develop the enormous projects that they had. Surgery has also become another big competitor, especially with all of the advanced navigation equipment that exists, or robotic surgery, and things of that nature. So we're definitely seeing a lot more competition overall for the capital dollars, which fairly much remain fixed.
Mm-hmm. What's Stan?
Well, radiology used to be king. IT over the last 2 years has been receiving the most capital, primarily because of meaningful use.
Right, but I mean, this is not going to last for a decade. Do you see something coming back to you in the next year or two?
Yes, I think so. I think we will take the #1 spot again.
From my,
so if I take a
Joe,
quick, yeah, go, Joe.
From my perspective, IT will continue to be a big spender, because if you look at the nature of IT and how quickly IT changes, the trends, the softwares, et cetera, I think that that's going to be a competitor for us going forward.
Oh, yeah, this is Stan again. I agree that they will be a competitor, but I think as far as actual dollars, imaging will go back to receiving more in the future.
Yeah, this is Todd. I agree. The issue is that, you know, each year our equipment gets older, and then we're spending more money just to keep that up and running than we should have probably replaced it. So at one point there has to be some more capital come back to radiology, because you can't continue to support the, you know, the older equipment.
Or you end up in a situation where you have less of it and you're pushing your availability out, and you know, that's kind of the flip side of that, is that if you can't get those dollars, again, operationally, you just can't function the same way you have.
Let me ask you, gentlemen, traditionally this market in the U.S. has been capital intensive, not leasing, not a pay-per-use. There's about 70% in the market overall, based on our own statistical data, that is capital driven. Do you see a change in the model of the way you acquire technology?
This is Todd. We went away from operating and capital leases, you know, 2 years ago, when everything was going to, you know, the new accounting principles came out, and that's really pretty much the philosophy of our whole hospital, that no capital operating leases, since you have to carry it on the books.
That's true here at my hospital also. This is Stan.
And this is Joe. We certainly paid more attention to leasing options, but at this point they've never proven to be cheaper in the long run. If you're going to run the equipment, the only real benefit that we've seen in that might be being able to replace equipment more frequently, but the overall cost of ownership would actually go up in any model I've seen.
You're absolutely right. It's from a equipment antiquation perspective, you're not going to get it with leasing. However, the overall cost of ownership is definitely more expensive when you do lease.
Even if it helps you to be more state of the art.
Well, but being state-of-the-art these days doesn't seem to be extremely important to insurance companies, and patients generally are not differentiating that way. And so while it is a competitive edge, it tends to be only for a short period of time, and we're having to do more with older things. We're still purchasing new equipment, but we're having to hold on to some things longer than we have in the past.
Agreed. It's no longer, you know, the state of the art is for their tertiary academic facilities who can probably afford that kind of stuff, but for the community hospitals and the people who are out there trying to get the patients in, a lot of patients don't care whether you have a 64-slice scanner or a 256-slice scanner. As long as it's a CT scan and can answer the questions that they're asking, that's all they're going to care for.
And their insurance companies are telling them, oh, no, it's all the same, but it'll be cheaper over here.
That's exactly right.
Exactly.
We had a couple of operating leases, and we end up buying those out. You know, then you go to the issue of, you know, fair market value, what that is, and then a lot of reasons why the technology, just like you just said, the technology was still good, so we ended up keeping it. And then, another issue is if you go with that model of operating lease and change them out, then you have construction and facility costs that nobody can afford, because the dollars are so tight.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Mark, do you have any question from the panelists before we move to the last element of the score?
Monica was asking whether, in response to this capital crunch, whether any of the panelists are entertaining any joint ventures, say between cardiology and imaging, to share resources, or perhaps going to hybrid suites like OR, incorporating imaging and shared services.
This is Joe. We've certainly had more joint ventures over the last few years, but I think it was more of a way of making sure that we kept at least part of a business when people were kind of threatening, I guess, to open it up themselves. And so you were in a predicament where you said, are we going to lose all of the business, or are we going to have to split it? And so the reason we're doing more joint ventures has more to do with keeping the business in some sense or another. As far as the hybrid piece of it, we are sharing some spaces, and it's really more of a utilization question, so that we're not duplicating equipment that would otherwise be fairly low use.
This is Stan. We haven't really gotten into the joint ventures here in this area at all.
How about Rand, Todd? No?
Now
Go ahead.
Go ahead. We haven't gotten into joint ventures with radiology and cardiology either. We are actually in the process of cross-training cardiac cath lab techs with IR techs and nurses as well. But as far as the equipment goes, it's still they're both separate.
Yeah, this is Todd. At our downtown academic hospitals, they're separate, but in our smaller ones, we are actually sharing between the two.
Very good. This was an excellent question again. Mark, let's move to the last score element, and this is the ability, the confidence to maintain and grow as a profit center. And this is the highest element of the score, surprisingly, and has remained fairly high throughout the years, even though you may see a little bit of a downward trend, although not very significant. So let me ask, the panel, the four of you, despite all the changes and all the negative and the not really good-looking news we had over the last year and a half, how come this is still very high? How come you can still manage to be a profit center?
Well, this is Joe. So in our market, we're still very much able to turn profit back at a fairly high rate. We haven't gotten pinched to a point where our margins are extremely tight, so we still have some room. But what's been interesting is that because imaging is such a contributor to the bottom line for the hospital as a whole, those changes that happen, even if you're still making a profit, affect the hospital bottom line, which is causing some rethinking, I guess, about what the profit margin is for the hospital as a whole.
Yeah, and I would agree with Joe, is the fact that there is a high profit margin in imaging, and because the hospital overall has so many different areas that don't turn a profit, I think the profit margin that is given to imaging will remain going forward.
I agree, and I think one thing is, as long as we're still paid fee for service, that will continue. I think that's what, once that changes, that will maybe change the whole paradigm. But I agree with everybody else.
Yeah, that's a good point. As long as we're still on fee for service, if they ever change that, yeah, look out.
Exactly. This is Stan. Imaging here at this hospital is the #1 revenue producer, and I don't anticipate that changing even with reimbursement declining.
Here's some additional data for you guys. If we slice the index, we show clearly that hospitals with beds greater than 250 have a much higher confidence in growth as a profit center than hospitals under 100 beds. Likewise, if you are in the worst north central region, you have the highest prospect to be profitable. So any comments on why this is?
Boy. Well, from my perspective, I think one of the reasons is that you have a higher cost of living in the Northeast, I think, as compared with some sections throughout the country. So consequently, when you look at the indexes for Medicare, it seems to be a higher rate of return, at least in the Boston area, than you would get in a more rural area. So I think that's going to drive some of the profits that are gained.
How about this different in size? You know, smaller hospitals have a harder time to grow as a profit center. Joe, would you have a sense for that?
Well, I guess all I could really equate that to is that typically the larger the facility, the more draw you have. For imaging, the concept of bed number is always a little obscure to me, since you know that what we do inpatient-wise is such a small proportion. We do so much more as an outpatient facility, but I imagine that has to do with the community size and where you're drawing from. I guess that the bigger you are, the more different pieces of equipment you have. Perhaps you have larger capital and you have a greater opportunity to grab market share. But you know, the smaller hospitals, I guess, just tend to have less. And even though we're a community hospital, we're still competing with hospitals in, say, the Denver metro area, which really does mean that we have to have things like, you know, 64 slice CTs or higher and 3T MRI. So we're not losing anything by virtue of our technology.
All right. Any other comments?
Yep. One cause could be that the smaller hospitals have smaller medical staffs. I wouldn't know that for a fact, but that's a possibility.
Yeah, another one would be is if it's small hospitals and part of a system where they don't have to duplicate the services.
Right.
You have similar purchasing, similar billing, you know, somebody doing that, you know, part of a system. So that could be an issue.
Very good. Mark, if we could move to the last slide, I'd like to ask a mobile question to our participant. What is your message to the vendors? You know, a number of OEM contrast media companies are on the call right now. In the light of this confidence medical imaging index, confidence index, what is the message you'd like to send to the vendors in terms of serving your needs better in the light of what we've talked about?
Well, I would say that the environment that we're functioning in has made it a much more competitive environment for vendors as well. We've recently went through an expansion and went out and looked at a fairly large purchase, and I saw a level of competition among vendors that we have not seen before. So I think they're understanding that our capital dollars are less, and if they want to keep us as customers, that they need to adjust their pricing accordingly.
Yeah, I agree. This is Stan. We used to be dedicated to pretty much one vendor. Those days are gone. The dollars are such that we have to buy the best with the lowest dollars that are available.
Right.
I agree with that, with what everybody else has said. You have to be able to get the best deal that you can, and the days of the, well, from our perspective, the days of the single source vendor is probably over with. Having said that, the system is trying to negotiate with a couple of the major OEMs to be sole source, but I don't see that happening in the next year probably.
This is Todd. We're a little bit different. We are have strategic agreement with our partners, and so we are kind of sole source going after that large discount. There's some things that we don't have under contract, and we do go after that. And it's kind of a conversation like, you know, if you could cut another $100,000 off this for $150, I can get a C-arm. So that's what we're like, you know, what else can I get out of our capital pool by getting this negotiated down? And I think the vendors are understanding that, and I agree with the rest of the panel. They're definitely hungry.
This is Joe again. One of the things that we did is and again, it's different if you're just doing a replacement of one piece of equipment at a time, but because we were doing an expansion, going to a single vendor allowed us to get the vendors to leverage themselves across the different modalities, because the different modalities had various returns that they were looking for. So they may not be able to give us something on a CT, for example, or get as deep as we wanted, but they were able to take it from a piece of nuclear medicine equipment. And so the vendors are getting a little more wise internally on how to work together in their different business groups.
Excellent. Unfortunately, the time is up. Just one more comment before we close. Yes? No? So I'd like to thank everybody. I'll turn over to Mark in just a second. I'm just going to ask everybody who participate here to watch on ADME.com future results of the confidence index. Hopefully these lines will go back up. I hope so. Let's be optimistic, and let me turn over to Mark. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank you, Christian. Well, we've come to the end of our time, and on behalf of the MarkeTech group, we'd like to thank everyone for your participation, and particularly we'd like to thank our panelists, Stan Castile, Joe McConey, Ray Wilburn, and Todd Stanley. After we close, would you please take a moment to complete the survey? Remember that the MarkeTech group is a medical technology marketing research firm, so we really do appreciate and thrive on your feedback. Good day to everyone, and we appreciate your time and attendance today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.